Knees were already aching when we got to the second terminal, and I hadn't said a word about it. That's the thing about me, I never said a word about it. We were at Pearson, all four of us. Me, my daughter, her husband, and their teenage son. A family trip to Portugal, they'd called it. Come with us, Mom. It'll be good for you. You've been cooped up in that apartment since Dad passed. That's what my daughter had said on the phone back in February, and I'd believed her. I'd actually believed her. I should have noticed the signs earlier. Like when she called to ask if I could book my own flight, just to make it simpler, you know how complicated it gets with 4 tickets. And then asked, almost as an afterthought, whether I'd be okay paying for the group car rental too since I had the better credit card. I said yes. I always say yes with her. My husband Gordon passed 2 years ago this past March, lung cancer. 18 months from diagnosis to the end, and I spent every one of those months at his side. When he was gone, I didn't know what to do with myself. 67 years old, retired from teaching elementary school, living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Mississauga that felt 4 times too big. My daughter Renata lived 40 minutes away in Oakville with her husband and their son. And I told myself that was close enough, that we were close enough. We weren't. I see that now. I just couldn't see it then. She had always been the kind of daughter who was warm in short bursts. She'd call on birthdays and holidays, show up for dinners with a bottle of wine and a hug, and then be gone again before the dishes were done. I told myself that was just her personality. Busy. Modern. That's what I told myself. The Portugal trip was her husband's idea. His name is Russell. And I want you to understand something about Russell before I go any further. Russell is not a cruel man. He's something more insidious than cruel. He's casually indifferent, the way some people are casually late or casually rude. He doesn't think about you enough to be mean to you on purpose. You're simply not in his field of vision. And somehow that feels worse. Their son Kyle was 16, broad-shouldered, already taller than his father, with earbuds in from the moment we left the house to the moment we fell asleep each night. He wasn't rude either, he was just absent. A ghost who ate your food and used your phone charger and never once said thank you. We landed in Lisbon on a Thursday morning in July. I had one rolling suitcase and a small carry-on. My daughter had 2 large checked bags. Russell had 1 large bag and a duffel. Kyle had a backpack the size of a compact car. By the time we got through customs and out to the arrivals hall, the plan was already clear, though no one had stated it out loud. Renata walked ahead with Kyle, pointing at something on her phone. Russell was on a call, and I was standing with 4 bags around me like I was guarding a small island. No one asked me to take the bags. They didn't have to ask. I stood there for a moment, my hand gripping the handle of Renata's larger suitcase, the one with the broken wheel that scraped instead of rolled. I remember thinking, when did this happen? When did I become the person who just picks things up? I rolled 2 bags and carried 1. My lower back was already talking to me. The first few days were fine in the way that things are fine when you're determined not to notice they aren't. Lisbon was beautiful. I genuinely loved it. The yellow trams, the blue tiles on the buildings, the light in the evening that turned everything amber. I had walked those streets in my imagination ever since a student of mine had done a project on Portugal back in 1998 and brought in pastéis de nata from a bakery downtown. I had waited nearly 30 years for this. But every morning at breakfast, Russell would order for the table without asking me what I wanted. Every time we sat down at a restaurant, Renata would say, "Mom, can you grab a table?" Which meant I arrived first, sat alone, and saved seats while they walked around the block finishing their conversation. Every museum, every viewpoint, every narrow cobblestone street, I was always a few steps behind. Always the one with the extra bag, always the one waiting on the corner. On the 4th day, Russell couldn't find his sunglasses. He looked in his bag, looked on the nightstand, and then turned to me with an expression I had never had directed at me before from anyone other than a difficult parent at a school meeting. "Did you move my things when you tidied up?" I had not tidied up. I had made my own bed and hung my own towels. That was all. "I didn't touch anything," I said. "Are you sure? Because they were right here." He found them 20 minutes later in his jacket pocket. He did not say anything to me about it. That night at dinner, the bill came and Renata said, without looking up from her phone, "Mom, do you want to put this one on your card? We'll sort it all out at the end." I paid. It was $112 Canadian, more or less, once I did the conversion in my head. I had been paying for most of our meals. We hadn't sorted anything out. I want to explain something here, because I know what some people think when they hear a story like this. They think, "Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you speak up?" And I've asked myself that. I've asked myself that many times since. Part of it was Gordon. For 39 years, Gordon was the one who handled conflict. Not because I was weak. I taught a classroom of 28 eight-year-olds every day for 32 years. I was not weak, but because we had a rhythm, Gordon and I. And part of that rhythm was that he was the one who pushed back in the family. I was the one who smoothed things over. When he died, I lost not just him, but that whole architecture of how we operated. I didn't know how to be the person who says, "That's not acceptable," out loud to my own daughter. And part of it was hope. I kept thinking it would shift, that Renata would notice, would turn around and see me standing there carrying her things, and something would cross her face, some recognition. But it didn't come. On the 6th day, we took the train to Porto. We had one compartment for the four of us, and I had the window seat, which was the one good thing. I watched the Portuguese countryside go by, the vineyards, the eucalyptus trees, the low hills going brown in the July heat, and for about 40 minutes I forgot everything and was just a woman on a train in a beautiful country. Then Kyle said, "Can I have the window seat? I want to film something." He didn't say please. He didn't ask me exactly. It was more of a statement than a question. And Renata looked at me with that particular expression I had learned to read over the years, the one that meant, "Don't make this a thing." I moved to the aisle seat. In Porto, something shifted. I'm not sure how to describe it except to say that I woke up on the 7th morning and felt something in my chest that had been there for days, finally. Name itself. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger exactly. It was clarity. I lay in bed in our rented apartment. I had the smaller bedroom, naturally, and I listened to Russell and Renata talking in the kitchen, and Kyle watching something with his earbuds half out, and I thought, I am not on a family vacation. I am on their vacation. There's a difference. We had a day trip planned. An hour's drive south to a coastal town I had wanted to see specifically, had mentioned 3 times before the trip, had even sent Renata an article about. That morning at breakfast, Russell announced that he'd found a golf course 40 minutes in the other direction, and that he and Kyle were going to spend the day there. "Kyle golfs now?" I asked. "He's learning," Renata said. She didn't look up. "So we're not going to—" "We can do it another day, Mom." There were 2 days left. Renata spent that day at a spa she had booked for herself. She mentioned it at breakfast as though it had been on the itinerary all along. I don't know when she booked it. I wasn't asked if I'd like to join. I spent that day alone, which turned out to be the best day of the entire trip. I walked. I found a small cafe by the river and sat there for 2 hours with a coffee and a pastel de nata and a paperback I'd bought from a cart, and nobody needed anything from me. I watched the Douro go by. An older woman at the table beside me noticed my book. It was an Anne Cleeves novel and said she'd read the whole Vera series. We talked for 40 minutes. Her name was Teresa, and she lived in Porto, and she had the most wonderful laugh. This big surprised laugh, like joy kept catching her off guard. That day, I remembered that I was a person. The trouble started on day 9. We were loading the car to drive back to Lisbon for our flight home. Everyone's luggage in the driveway. Everyone doing what they always did. Russell on his phone, Kyle drifting toward the car, Renata giving directions without lifting anything. I had my own suitcase. I was reaching for it when Russell said, not looking at me, "Can you grab Renata's big one? It's awkward with the trunk space." I looked at the bag. It was the one with the broken wheel. It was heavy. I knew exactly how heavy it was because I'd been rolling it through airports and over cobblestones for 9 days. My back has been bothering me, I said. I don't think I should. It was the first time I had said anything like that out loud. It came out quieter than I meant it. Russell looked at me then. Actually looked at me. And he said, "It's only to the car." Renata was rearranging something in her tote bag. She didn't look up. "I want to tell you I said no clearly. I want to tell you I put my foot down right there in the driveway in Porto." But I didn't. I picked up the bag. I felt my lower back flare, that specific hot sensation I had been trying to manage with ibuprofen and ignoring, and I got it to the car. I didn't say anything, but something settled in me in that moment. Something quiet and certain, like a door clicking shut very gently. We got to the Lisbon airport with 3 hours to spare. Long enough, Russell said, to have a sit-down lunch. We found a restaurant in the terminal, the kind that costs twice what it should because you trapped, and we sat down. I looked at the menu. I was tired and my back hurt and I wanted soup. After we ordered, Renata said she had to stop at duty-free. She asked Kyle if he wanted to come. He did. She asked Russell if he wanted to come. He did. She did not ask me. "I'll stay and watch the bags," I said, because it was clear that was the expectation. "Thanks, Mom." She was already standing. They were gone for 45 minutes. The food came. I let theirs go cold. I ate my soup alone at a table in the Lisbon airport, watching families walk by, couples, solo travelers with books and headphones, and I thought about Teresa and her surprised laugh and how peaceful that afternoon by the river had been. When they came back, Russell looked at his cold food and said, "You could have texted us." I looked at him. I looked at my daughter. "I don't think I should," I said. Carefully. Deliberately. He frowned. "Shouldn't what? Apologize for that." There was a pause. Renata looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her face in a long time. Something close to attention, like she was actually registering me. Russell said something dismissive and picked up his fork. The moment passed. But I had said it. I had said it out loud and I had not walked it back. We boarded the flight. I had a middle seat because I had booked last, and that was what was left. Russell had the aisle. Renata had the window. Kyle was in the row ahead with his earbuds in. For the first 2 hours, I sat between my son-in-law and a stranger, and I stared at the headrest in front of me and I made a decision. When we landed at Pearson, it was past midnight, all of us exhausted, standing at the baggage carousel under the harsh terminal lights. Russell reached past me to grab his bag and clipped my shoulder without noticing. Renata was on her phone. Kyle was already walking toward the exit. Renata's large suitcase came around on the belt. It stopped in front of me. She was still on her phone. She nodded at the bag. Just a small tilt of her head, not even a full look. I put my hand on the handle, and then I took my hand off the handle, and then I took my hand off the handle. "I can't lift that," I said. "My back." "Mom, it's right there." "I know where it is. I can't lift it." She looked up from her phone then. Really looked at me. And I held her gaze and I did not fill the silence with an apology or an explanation or a softer version of what I had just said. Russell came over and grabbed the bag. Nobody said anything on the way to the car. We drove back in almost total silence. The GPS talking, the highway lights going past, Kyle asleep in the back. When we pulled up in front of my building in Mississauga, Russell popped the trunk and set my suitcase on the sidewalk. Renata said, "Okay, Mom, safe home," already looking at her phone again. I stood on the sidewalk and watched their car pull away and I thought, that's it then. I went upstairs. I made myself a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Gordon and I had had 1,000 breakfasts, and I let myself feel everything that I had been not feeling for 9 days. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears, which surprised me. It was more like the feeling after you've been holding your breath for a very long time and you finally stop. I slept for 11 hours. In the days that followed, I did not call Renata. I didn't send the usual just checking in text. I didn't email the photos I'd taken on the trip that I knew she'd want. I had been the one to maintain our relationship for years. The calls, the cards, the remembering, and for the first time I just stopped. Not out of anger, out of honesty. She called me after 9 days. Her voice was bright, a little careful. "How are you feeling? Back to normal?" "I'm well," I said. There was a pause. "We should get together soon. Kyle has a thing, but maybe the week after?" "Maybe," I said. She caught something in my voice, I think. She said, "Mom, is everything okay?" And I said, "I've been thinking about the trip, about how it went." Quiet on her end. "I think you and I need to have an honest conversation," I said. "Not on the phone, when you have time for it." "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where I say what I've needed to say for a while now and you actually listen." She said she would come over on Saturday. She didn't come on Saturday. She didn't come on Saturday. She texted to reschedule. "Something with Kyle," she said. I said of course, and I meant it because I was no longer in a hurry. I had stopped being in a hurry. The urgency I used to feel around my daughter, the desperate undercurrent of "please see me, please include me, please include me, please," it had gone quiet. Not gone quiet. She came the following Thursday. She brought coffee from the Tim Hortons at the end of my street, double, the way I like it, and I thought, she does know things about me. She pays some attention. There's something to work with here. We sat at my kitchen table and I said what I had to say. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't perform it. I told her that I had felt like luggage on that trip, that I had paid for meals I was not thanked for, carried bags I was not asked to carry, been left at tables and treated as a convenience, that I had not expected to be treated like a guest. I knew families didn't work that way, but I had expected to be treated like a person, like her mother, like someone whose back hurt, whose husband was 2 years gone, who had come on that trip because she loved her daughter and had wanted to believe her daughter wanted her there. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I didn't realize." I wanted to say, "How could you not realize?" But I didn't, because I could see on her face that she meant it, not as an excuse, as a confession. She had not been raised by a mother who said what she needed. She had been raised by me, the person who smooths things over, who carries the bags, who fills the silence with reassurance. She had learned to take the path of least resistance because I had paved it for her my whole life. That was a hard thing to sit with. We talked for 3 hours. We cried, both of us, at different points, for different reasons. By the end, we hadn't fixed anything, but we had started. That was enough for one Thursday afternoon. I signed up for a watercolor class in September at the rec center on her Ontario. I had always wanted to paint and had always had a reason not to. I go on Tuesday evenings and I am by some distance the worst person in the class, and I don't mind even slightly. There's a woman there named Gloria who paints the most extraordinary landscapes and brings homemade shortbread for the group, and a man named Herb who is learning to paint his late wife from memory, and all of us are in our 60s and 70s and doing something just because we want to. And every Tuesday evening, I drive home in my own car on my own schedule, and I feel like myself. Renata and I are finding our way, slowly. She calls more now. Last month, she came over for Sunday dinner. Just her, without Russell or Kyle, and we cooked together, and it was almost like it used to be, back when she was in her 20s and would come over and we'd make her father's pasta sauce and talk for hours. Almost. There are things I understand now that I didn't before. I understand that love without boundaries isn't love, it's a transaction, and not even a fair one. I understand that I am allowed to be tired. I am allowed to say my back hurts and not pick up the bag. I am allowed to sit at a cafe by a river in Porto and simply be a woman having coffee, with no one needing anything from me. Gordon used to say, and I can hear his voice so clearly when I think of it, he used to say that the bravest thing a person could do was know when to put something down. I don't think he meant luggage, but it applies. I think about that moment at the baggage carousel a lot. My hand on the handle. And then my hand off the handle. It sounds like such a small thing. It was the biggest thing I had done in years. Looking back, I can see now that what happened on that trip, and honestly, in the years leading up to it, wasn't anyone's fault in some simple, clean way. It was the result of a pattern I had helped build. Every time I paid without asking to be paid back. Every time I moved to the aisle seat without a word. Every time I picked up the bag I'd been told to pick up, I was teaching the people around me that this was acceptable, that I was fine with it, that I didn't need anything in return. The cause and the effect were tangled up together, and I was on both ends of the rope. That's not easy to admit, but I think it's true. What I've come to understand, sitting at my kitchen table or in that Tuesday watercolor class or driving home alone on nights when the highway is quiet, is that there are really three things that determine how your life goes. Not luck, not other people's choices, though those matter too, but something more internal than that. The first is how you treat people when it costs you something. Not when it's easy to be kind, but when you're tired, when your back aches, when nobody is watching and nobody will thank you. I was decent to Russell and Kyle even when they weren't decent to me, and I don't regret that. That's just who I am. But I confused being decent with being a doormat, and those are not the same thing. Real integrity means being honest as well as kind. It means saying, "My back hurts," and meaning it even when the bag is right there and it would be simpler to just pick it up. The second is knowing your own mind well enough to act on it. I had known for years that something was wrong in how Renata and I operated. I had known it the way you know a floorboard is soft before it gives way. You feel it underfoot every time, but you keep walking on it anyway. Wisdom isn't just about understanding things. It's about trusting what you understand, about not talking yourself out of what you already know to be true. Teresa by the river in Porto. She was a stranger, and in 40 minutes she treated me more like a person than my own family had in 9 days. That told me something. I should have listened to it sooner. And the third is the willingness to keep going after you've decided to change something. That conversation with Renata at my kitchen table was one of the hardest things I have ever done. Harder than I expected because she cried, and when she cried, I wanted to take it all back and tell her everything was fine. That instinct, to smooth it over, to protect her from discomfort at the expense of my own, that instinct is still in me. It probably always will be. Persisting through that, sitting with the discomfort instead of dissolving it, choosing the harder and more honest path. That is not a one-time decision. It's a daily one. I'm still learning. The watercolor class is still humbling me every Tuesday. Renata and I are still finding our footing. Gordon is still gone, and that particular quiet in the apartment is still something I am learning to live inside of rather than around. But I put the bag down, and I have not picked it back up.